Saturated fats may not be as unhealthy as we once thought. Today, we reevaluate the health effects of our tasty foe. Alright, let's just get this out of the way before we begin. We're going to focus on saturated fats. There are three major types of fats that you need to think about in your diet. That is saturated fats, unsaturated fats, and trans fats. The way I was taught in college was unsaturated fats have these unsaturations in their chemical structure, which makes them liquid at room temperature. So think like olive oil and stuff like that. Saturated fats don't have these unsaturations, so they don't have these kinks in their molecular compound, so they actually clump together at room temperature. So think of solid stuff like animal fat, coconut oil, and other things that tend to coagulate when the temperature is like 70 degrees. You'll find saturated fats in a variety of foods, including beef, poultry, looking at my notes right now, lard, butter, shortening, and most dairy products. Trans fats are a different beast altogether. I think we did away with them a couple of years ago, maybe a little more than that. But trans fats are kind of a man-made compound. I don't believe they exist naturally, but we have banned them from restaurants in large amounts because they actually have been proven to be very, very bad for you. So, saturated fats are bad for you, right? Well, maybe not. Asterisk, big asterisk on that. Just a little disclaimer, this is not health advice. This is intended for educational purposes. You should always consult your doctor before you start making any serious dietary changes. But okay, let's get on with it. So, saturated fats were or have been recommended against by public health agencies and all that stuff for the past 50 years or so. So in the 1990s, there was a big non-fat or low-fat craze where we were recommended to eat a low-fat diet because it's healthy. Not really. So what we did was, for example, we would eat things like yogurts, right? Non-fat or low-fat yogurt, which was, low-fat, so it's good for you. Turns out a lot of that stuff was laced with sugar, refined sugars, that are actually really bad for you. What the new research is showing is that high sugar diets are what's causing coronary heart disease, not necessarily saturated fats. And you want to know what's even crazier? Some studies are actually showing that saturated fats may help with coronary heart disease. In other words, it may be healthy for you. Check out the links for those scientific articles below. So that begs the question, why did we think that saturated fats were bad for you? Well, it turns out NPR actually reported on another report back in 2016 that found it was the sugar companies. So there was Sugar Research Foundation, I think, SRF? Yeah, Sugar Research Foundation. What they did was they paid off some Harvard scientists to pass off the negative health effects of sugar and basically blame saturated fats for those bad effects on the heart. So it turns out a lot of the research that has influenced what the public health agencies have recommended is due to bad studies or studies that really just ignored the negative effects of sugar and blamed it on fat instead. I highly recommend reading that article. Link to it down in the description. It's like a quick 5-minute read, and then you could basically go down a rabbit hole and read all the links that they reference. It's pretty interesting stuff. And now to address the asterisks that I had earlier. Although saturated fats may have protective qualities and are good for you in certain amounts, don't just go about eating saturated fats like crazy, right? Fat is still fat. A little biology lesson. We have 3 macronutrients that we talk about often. It's protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Proteins are good because we need them. We need those essential amino acids. Carbohydrates are good. Well, complex carbohydrates are good because we need those as a fuel source for our muscle, right? They go as glycogen and all this stuff for our cellular functions. And fat is extremely valuable because, one, our brain is made up of mostly fat, and because it is a very high calorie food, right? If you think about us back in the days when we weren't civilized, high fat was very good because it's a good energy source, right? Fat has the most calories per gram of the 3 macronutrients can't talk today. The 3 macronutrients that we just spoke about. So it's really good, especially if there's a famine or if you're a hunter-gatherer and calories are a little hard to come by. So if you eat a lot of that, right? In today's society, we're not exactly hunter-gatherers, or most of us aren't hunter-gatherers. So if you eat a lot of fats, you will become what you eat. And as you can tell right now, I am sweating, not because I am fat, but because the fat in my body is, well, keeping my heat in. So the short answer, or the takeaway from this video, is don't just outright avoid saturated fats because you think they're bad for you. They actually do not cause coronary heart disease like we once thought, right? It may be a contributing factor, but sugar is a much greater risk factor for coronary heart disease than saturated fats. And some studies show that saturated fats may actually protect against coronary heart disease, which is interesting. Keep in mind though, every body is different. Literally every body is different, right? So for example, I have a friend who can drink a whole bottle of tequila, a whole liter of tequila in one night by himself. I've seen him do it. And he can process that a-okay. I cannot. If I take a teaspoon of tequila, I will throw up within 15 minutes and be very sick because my body and his body is different due to genetic differences. Same thing goes for fats, okay? Not every body can process fats in the same ways. So you might have heard of the ketogenic diet where people go to some pretty far extremes to eat a whole lot of fats and almost no carbohydrates in order to get into ketosis and just live off of fat. That may work for some people, but it's not recommended for everyone because not everyone has the genes to metabolize those fats without creating some really bad compounds in your body. So as always, please speak to a physician before you decide to go on a high-fat diet. I think it's always better to just eat whole foods and maybe get some genetic testing to find out what genes you have and what may be the best diet for your body if you can afford that. Not sure why I put air quotes around ketosis. That's an actual biological process, so sorry about that. Ketosis is a real thing, and it happens naturally too. So there you have it. Saturated fats, maybe not as bad as we once thought. Of course, take that with a grain. Don't actually take it with a grain of salt. Low sodium diet. So, but keep that in mind when you're eating foods, because not all of it is bad for you. Thanks again for watching, and as always, go ahead and leave a comment below. Check out the links because those are some pretty interesting reads, and YouTube has changed things around, so I think like and subscribe if you can, please.